Hi, everyone. Like Simon said, I'm from DFS Lab. We do a lot of work, mostly around bootcamps to get people interested in, get developers and startups interested in the Mojaloop community. Sorry, next slide. Okay. So just a quick overview of DFS Lab. We are an investment and research firm, very focused on the African continent. And I have a bunch of colleagues spread over, the world who work with me, especially Gifts, works with me, and Jake work with me on the Mojaloop program. And so we typically run boot camps, mainly to focus on, education and awareness, just getting people to, like, especially startups in the financial space, to know more about Mojaloop, have an understanding of it, how it works, what it means to be part of the community, and what they can build on it. And so, like, mainly education awareness. And then a very key part of it is to test and validate commercial use cases, right? So many times you have people who have an idea of how Mojaloop works, but then they have no insight into how to think about, like, a commercial use case for it, right? And so along with the Mojaloop team, working very closely with Simeon, Desire, and Sam, we kind of work with these teams, get them to a point where they can test and validate, commercial use cases for Mojaloop. And so, just the basic objective of the boot camps. So illustrate the commercial value of Mojaloop, like I just said. I'll run through this quickly. Galvanize the startup and developer ecosystem around Mojaloop through, experience supporting startups from the investment arm of the DFS Lab. And then, of course, keep the community up to date with any changes, that have come up, from our interactions at the bootcamp. So one good example of that is just like a constant request for, some kind of sandbox, no matter how simple. And, working with the Mojaloop team, at the time, we came up with something that developers were able to quickly get through. And so kind of coming back to the community and saying these are like some asks, and these are things that developers are looking for. And then the last part is helping financial service providers develop, a learning agenda around the needs of the fintechs and startups we work with. And so these are some of the teams that we've worked with on our bootcamps. I think we have some of them here, and it's really interesting to have these teams come around. So the bootcamp, just to give you an idea of the format, it's a 4-day design sprint format where you come with, a bunch of problems that you think you want to solve in day one, and you kind of crystallize them over the next, 4 days to the point where you have a working prototype, and then we do a demo day on day 5, and some of you have been part of that. And so, yeah, this is some of the teams we've worked with. And this, Jake presented this at the last community gathering, but I thought we should look at it again and kind of have an idea of what many of them come in looking to build. So, many of them think, I'm coming in, I want to build, a switch, or like build something around the switch. I'm looking at building something around interoperability. I want to be able to, like, communicate with other players in the ecosystem. I'm kind of trying to build a wallet functionality into my app. A bunch of them, want to do cross-border transactions because maybe they're already kind of dominant in the countries where they are, and they want to expand to other countries. And so cross-border is like top of mind. And then interoperable agent networks is also like, a kind of top use case that we see. And then on the other side, you'd see like what they've actually demoed. So top of the list is agent network, which was like kind of like the biggest thing in the first bootcamp. And then over time, you'd see a bunch of cross-border remittance solutions, e-payment portal, P2P and merchants. And some of these have been defined by the focus of the bootcamps. So if we had a bootcamp where there was like, the focus was PISP, for example, you would have some of the teams kind of think and build like really cool solutions around that. So yeah, well, I thought it would be great to share some of the lessons we've learned, working with the startups on bootcamps over the past few years. So we find that we get some of the best use cases and demos when there's like a focused kind of topic area for the bootcamps. And these bootcamps focus on very distinct features in the Mojaloop platform, and then you have devs thinking about how they will use them in the real world environment and try to get a solid understanding of them. In trying to recruit like companies and startups for the bootcamp, the commercial relevance of Mojaloop is like extremely key, right? It makes no sense for many of them if they almost don't see why they should be doing this from a commercial perspective. And then over the last, I would say the last two bootcamps, we've started to see an opportunity for research, kind of like research bodies and research firms to start thinking about ways to collaborate with the Mojaloop community and kind of use Mojaloop to address like real world problems they're facing and they see in the field. And it's something we're looking to expand on over the next couple of bootcamps. And then we've had like a lot of feedback around, documentation and developer engagement, right? Some of the early complaints we had for many of these bootcamps was like complaints about, the Mojaloop documentation. And you have many of these developers who are coming from working with something like, Node.js, for example, huge community, very detailed documentation. And then many of them kind of get lost, they feel lost. But I think that's one of the things that we've tried to work on, with the community over the years, having people like, Sam really work closely with the teams and point them in the direction of resources. But we're learning that this is really very key for the growth of the community, especially for developers coming from the startup side. And so I think, on a final note, I wanted to talk about the kind of recurring challenges and that teams have faced from the bootcamps. And so for this, I'd reach I reached out to Sam, and he has agreed to kind of take us through some of this and like what the community is, doing to make things easier in this sense. So, there's regulatory acceptance and support. We'll go into each of this like very in quite some detail. Ease of use and accessibility, testing and development support, interoperability and transaction management. And so what we just tried to do was kind of like put like a bunch of issues that teams have said they faced and try to put them into these 4 categories. It's not perfect, but it's like a start for like attacking some of this. So we'll start with, regulatory acceptance and support. Oh, and the logos you see there is just like feedback for from the teams. Like, so which teams gave the specific feedback? There's like a lot more, but these were like the key ones we picked out. So regulatory acceptance and support, hurdles in obtaining regulatory acceptance, navigating complex regulatory landscapes, and aligning with compliance standards. This has been like an issue for many of the teams when they start interacting with Mojaloop, especially if they're in countries where there has never been a deployment of Mojaloop, or you don't have anybody, that has worked on that. And even in terms of having conversations with regulators in the first place, right? They find that they run into some kind of blockades, if I'm putting it that way. So Sam? Yeah, who's going to talk to this?
Sorry, I was okay, thank you. Thank you, Joey, for the session. We have James and Michael over here. Would it make sense to have them sit over there and answer the questions? Thank you. I know Michael was recently part of some of the discussions as part of the POCs we discussed earlier. Would you be comfortable taking that first question, Michael? Regarding the concerns raised around regulatory acceptance and support.
Sure. The problem is, I think, when developers attend boot camps and hackathons and things like that, they kind of assume that there will be a Mojaloop scheme in existence that they can attach to. Now, as you've heard yesterday, putting a Mojaloop scheme in place is not a simple thing. There's a lot of work, and as we keep saying, most of the work is not technical work. It's questions about how the scheme is going to operate, how it's going to be regulated, who can join it. All of those in the boot camps are just assumed. And I'm not sure that it's possible for us to give a general answer that says, this is how it's going to work. And it's also the case, I think, that individual fintechs will naturally be concentrating more on particular kinds of participants in Mojaloop schemes. They'll be interested in one type of scheme rather than another. So kind of sad to start on a down note, but I'm not sure I can really give a very substantial positive answer to that. It all depends, is what I'm saying. Okay. Want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't really think I have anything substantial to add value to what you've said, Michael. Yes, I have also encountered the assumption when groups of developers and business innovators come to Mojaloop, there is often some misunderstanding about what Mojaloop is. Some people think there is one Mojaloop in the world, and how do I connect to it? Some people assume that there is a Mojaloop scheme in their country or in their region. I suspect that it's a common misconception. I think possibly the community, although we do try hard to communicate what Mojaloop is, it's such a complex and nuanced thing. Sometimes it's very hard to articulate that in such a way that anybody who's new to the ecosystem can understand. So I set that as a challenge to the community to figure out and help us communicate what Mojaloop is and what it is not. Thank you.
So I thought of something that I wanted to add, if that's okay. And that is that we, at the foundation, I think all of us believe that one of the main drivers for take-up for interoperable payment systems is going to be the innovations that fintechs, local to the market bring. They're going to be the people who build the applications that convince customers in those countries that they need to belong to the instant payment systems so that they can get the things done that they want. So one of the things that I think we want to do, and it's one of the really valuable things that comes from the boot camps and the other things that DFS are organizing, is good ideas that can be fed back into the central banks, into the regulators to say, if you did this, if you implemented a Mojaloop in your country, then here are lots of ways in which it could accelerate the process of digitization of payments overall. And at the bottom, what we're interested in is moving from cash to digitization. The developers, the fintechs, are going to be the engines that really provide that impetus, I think. So even if it kind of seems that it's not possible now, having the knowledge of those great ideas is going to be something that we can put to good use when we talk to the people who are thinking about possibly starting schemes and implementing it.
Thanks, Michael.
One additional thing that sprung to my mind while listening to you, Michael, and I know we're blocking further sessions, but I do realize that this week we have some very distinguished guests who are close to regulators. I would encourage them to bring regulators into the conversation. The more input we have from regulators into what we're trying to achieve, the better we can align the platform we're trying to build with their particular requirements. Regulators have a very difficult job to do. They're in a very tough position, yet they're being asked on one hand to protect individuals and businesses, companies from harm, damage. And on the other hand, they're being asked to facilitate innovation, which drives economic growth and better well-being for the populations that they regulate. But please, if you're able to apply any influence, please encourage anybody in the regulatory space to come and join the Mojaloop community. You'd be very, very welcome here. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, James. So we'll quickly move on to the next issue we face. Okay, so testing and development support. So, testing environments, for many of them, absence of a sandbox environment for testing and validating ideas. And then there's a complaint about the learning curve and need for more direct technical support.
Yeah, I'll try to address some of that. I think my colleague Sam, technical director at the Mojaloop Foundation, might be able to answer in a bit more detail. But at a high level, the Mojaloop Foundation does have some limited budget to provide sandbox environments for Mojaloop deployments and programs that are strategically important, we think, to our ultimate goals of improving financial inclusion around the world. So we can provide sandbox environments. We have a process whereby individuals can complete a form and submit that form to us at the foundation, and we will assess how long they want the environment for, what kind of capabilities they want. We figure out how much that's likely to cost us and try to get the budget allocated. And then we spin up a sandbox and we provide those companies or individuals with all the credentials and IP addresses and DNS names that they need to start interacting with the platform. Do you have anything to add to that, Sam?
Thank you, James. I wanted to thank DFS Lab for bringing all these up for discussion. It's been great to be part of the hackathons and events as well. Without taking too much time, I want to add some detail there as well. So the testing environment, there is a workstream participation tools that we have where we are looking at several tools. While we do support sandboxes, we want to reserve that for the real situations where sandboxes are needed. There are different tools at different levels for development, QA testing, demos. So we have tools like the testing toolkit, Mojaloop, and then we have a core test harness. And then, of course, we do have normal Helm deployments on cloud and on-prem as well. The work is ongoing. So we need to see what the requirement there is, and we can cater for that. We're also trying to improve that process, making it easier and more lightweight tooling to deploy that locally so that you don't need a sandbox hosted in the cloud for all purposes. And on the learning curve, I think, at least personally, I believe that one of the greatest assets, not people, but outside of that, of Mojaloop is the Mojaloop training program. And we have like a good number of courses, at least 5 fundamental level, and then some specialized courses. It's been a great asset, and we need to continually keep it relevant, current, but it's already there, and any feedback on that would be very welcome, and I would encourage everyone to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks. Can I just add a couple of comments on the learning curve and technical support? Learning curve first. The Mojaloop APIs, which is typically how fintechs or third parties would interact with a Mojaloop scheme, they have been designed carefully with a lot of thought and consideration over the years and evolved. They have to support a very large number of potential use cases, and as such, they're quite general and abstract, which, yes, the first time you come and look at the APIs, they might be quite mind-boggling. But in the documentation, there are quite a few worked examples and test collections that developers can refer to. I think we possibly could do more as a community to help people with those first steps. What I will say is that quite a deliberate early choice during the Mojaloop project was HTTP-based web APIs. So our belief was that the majority of software engineers who came along to integrate with Mojaloop to extract value from it would already understand the basic web technologies and protocols that we use for those external interfaces. Those being HTTP, which, as we all know, is the protocol that all web applications use to talk between browsers and servers. We use that very standard set of tools. The message bodies are all in JSON, which is a very common format for interchanging messages in web applications. So the fundamentals, in theory, are very accessible. I accept that the complexity is understanding how to use the APIs to achieve your business outcomes. So I think as the project continues and we have more real-world use cases coming to the fore, we'll see more worked examples in the documentation and made public in blogs and on GitHub that will help people. Technical support, we do have a core maintenance team who are very active on Slack, who are available to answer any questions and queries that people might have. Slack is our main way of communicating with developers in the community. It's very rare that a question remains unanswered on Slack for more than a day or so. But there are usually, there are a large number of very motivated and passionate people close to the Mojaloop project who gladly give their time to help other people. So if there's a perception that technical support is hard to come by, I'd love to talk to those individuals to understand the exact issues that they had. We care very deeply about being accessible. So yeah, please, if there's things we can do better, let's do them better. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I think closely related. Okay, so testing, yeah, so we've talked about this, sorry. Okay, yeah, so interoperability and transaction management. So we get like all this come up almost like every bootcamp.
Well, I'm happy to say that you asked and we listened. So we are currently in the process of adding currency conversion support to Mojaloop and to the Mojaloop APIs. I'll be talking about that tomorrow. We are also involved in cross-border, extending the APIs to support cross-border requirements. However, what I said about national schemes and regulation goes double, triple, quadruple for cross currencies. Now, if you're talking about being able to interact with people who have accounts as participants in other jurisdictions, then there are considerable difficulties in regulating and making sure that regulators are happy that you can connect either to someone in another scheme or to someone directly to someone who belongs to your scheme but has an institution which is regulated in another jurisdiction. These are difficult questions, and they're not questions, as I said before, that the Mojaloop Foundation can answer directly. Can offer our support to people who are implementing such cross-border schemes, and we're very keen to do that. I mean, you heard yesterday about the fantastic work that COMESA are doing to develop a scheme which will cover all of the jurisdictions of the COMESA member states. That's really, I think, the first implementation that we've, well, it's not the first implementation. It's the first implementation we've had which connects different schemes, different national payment schemes together. We're very excited about it, and we are prepared to offer whatever support we can to make sure that that happens, and to make sure that it happens in the best way and the simplest way for people to join. But there is a limit to what we can do. It's something which essentially will be about the schemes and about the regulators. Bulk transactions?
Thank you, Michael. Briefly addressing the other 2 points, I'm happy and comfortable in saying that we can now support high volume transactions. With the Mojaloop, the current latest release 15.10 and a 15.20, which is happening today or tomorrow, Acacia. We have support for bulk, not just in the core, but in our participation tools like the SDK scheme adapter and payment manager as well. So that's a good update. Along with that, it's not just that we are supporting the message flow, but also the performance requirements support for that as well. And unique ID transactions, we do have support for that. The specification supports unique ID for most of the requests. And even in cases like the lookup calls where there are no IDs, we do have end-to-end trace headers. These are optional, but those can be used for transaction tracing. And we have the tooling support for that as well. I think we saw in the presentations yesterday in POCs, PizzaWorks and others showed us the tools that we use, the dashboards, Grafana, Prometheus, and things like that we can use for monitoring and tracing. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add something on the bulk side? It's true, as Sam says, that Mojaloop supports bulk transactions, but those bulk transactions are transactions which are initiated by participant institutions in a Mojaloop network. So they're instituted by banks or mobile money companies. I think what's being asked for by these people is an extension to the third-party API to enable them, the people who run payroll and those sorts of people, to issue bulk requests through the PISP interface. Now we're working on that, but it's not there yet. And there are some issues that we need to make sure that we have got properly nailed down before we can provide that support. Now I'm going to issue a shameless trailer at this point. We've got a session tomorrow late afternoon when we want to talk about the Change Control Board, which is the body that oversees the Mojaloop APIs. And I want to talk about examples from an actual DFS hackathon that happened last year, and essentially to try and answer the question, why haven't we been better at responding to the sorts of requirements that were articulated there? So there's going to be some apologies, certainly from my side, but also some appeals for help to try and get the people who won that hackathon. I think they're here today. That's Alain Kajingwe. Yeah, no. Yeah, hi Alain, I see you there. And Elijah Okello. You're over there. Excellent. So I'm going to be saying to you guys, if you help us, we will definitely help you. So don't miss tomorrow afternoon's session is what I'm saying.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Thanks, James. Thanks, Sam, so much. I really appreciate the time and looking forward to the session tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. And I think that's it. If you want to if you want to see some of the, like a compilation of our reports from, all the from the past boot camps, you can, scan this and hopefully dig into the last, I think 4 or 5 boot camps. Thanks so much. Really appreciate the time.